Well, I'm going to try and bring it home with this, my fourth presentation in the series, and it's such a blessing to be part of the series here at Washington Avenue. Again, I'm so thankful to the elders and the ministry staff and the warm reception and kindness that has been shown to me on this day. But our focus for this session is the impact of having a godly husband and a godly wife and or father and mother in the home. So we're kind of covering both of those ideas in this session. But I do have a disclaimer. And as I thought about this, the longer I thought about it, I realized there's some things that need to be said up front before we dive into this topic, because I would like the material to be received in the right way. I recognize that there are those of you watching this video that come from a really broad array of family backgrounds and stages in life and even stages in the family life cycle. Some of you are still young and unmarried, and my recommendation to you is come to Freed-Hardeman and we will find you a spouse, possibly. I say that with a tongue in cheek, a little bit. The other recognition that I have, though, is others of you have been lifelong singles and have had are having a fulfilling and meaningful life as a single person, and by all means, that is wonderful. We know the Apostle Paul recommends that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and that opens up opportunities for service and just meaningful purpose in a way that those of us that are married may not be able to enjoy because of other family responsibilities. There are those of you that are married without children. There are those that are married with young or adolescent children in the home, and they might be biological children of yours or adopted children or foster children, or you may be functioning as a single parent household. And I know of some wonderful people as single individuals who have adopted children, fostered children, and yet others who maybe had a spouse leave them or a spouse pass away. And so the family configurations are going to be unique. Some of you have possibly been divorced or widowed and remarried, bringing children from your previous marriage into the new blended or step family, along with some distinct challenges that arise from such situations. As a counselor, I've observed over the years that families often, rather than blend, they kind of collide at first when all these new expectations and new people and changes up the birth order of everyone coming in, that can impact. And so there are also situations, though, in which grandparents are raising their grandchildren, or uncles and aunts are raising nieces and nephews because of perhaps some unfortunate situations that have come up. And there's likely some of you who have been married for years and have never had children, and you have decided to maybe focus in other ways in your life and serve the Lord without having children in the home. And then yet some that are now widowed with grown children or deceased children. All I'm trying to say is that every family is distinct. Every family is unique, and every family is special and is important to God. There are those of you that grew up in strong, wonderful Christian families, and others who did not grow up in a Christian home, and you had an uphill battle perhaps in your faith development. But you are where you are by the grace of God, and I'm thankful for you. I know the Lord loves you, and the congregation appreciates and loves you as well. So other side, I need to mention this one too. Some people grew up in a divided household, religious divided household, or a family where perhaps one of your parents was abusive or an alcoholic, and your home life was very difficult. So all of that being understood, it's a bit challenging for me to know exactly how to frame this, to reach out and connect with as many people as possible. And I appreciate your patience with me, because I do not want to come across as if I know it all, because I do not. And I don't want to come across condescending in any way or insensitive to your specific situation. I'm going to do my best to, while recognizing the variety of circumstances that there may be in the homes and the families in this congregation and in other individuals that might be watching this, and that also exist in the world and in the church as a whole. My wife and I were married for about 10 years before we started our family with children, and because of health situations, we ended up growing our family through adoption. So I'm an adoptive parent. I have that perspective. I don't pretend to speak for every adoptive parent. Everyone has got their unique circumstances and the situations that led to their family coming together. But that is my experience, and that is where I'm coming from as a father. I would like to take a look at some family trends and statistics just to set the tone culturally, to see what the landscape is in our nation. Today, only about 64% of children live in homes with two parents who are married. 64%. And so that represents an all-time low, according to the Pew Research Center. Trend data shows that a stark and steady decline has taken place since 1960. That's no surprise. But back in 1960, approximately 88% of children lived with married parents. 15% of children today are living with parents who are remarried, and 7% are living with cohabiting parents, while 26% are living with one parent only. And so, again, not, every family is a traditional family. I think we understand that, and that's the case in the world and inside the church as well. But findings overwhelmingly support, for better or worse, but they overwhelmingly support that the best environment to raise children is in a two-parent household where the parents are married. Of course, not every two-parent family is ideal, and sometimes children are better off in a single-parent home, especially if there's abuse or other issues taking place. But that is the exception and not the rule. So when I think about God's design for the home, God's given us an incredible design for the home, and especially for the type of emotionally and spiritually nurturing a relationship that should exist between parents and their children. God's design is beautiful. God's design is brilliant. God's design is blessed. God's design is best. And I'm going to add, God's design is found here. God's design is biblical. God's design is biblical. And so, again, while I appreciate the reality of families that come in all shapes and sizes with different parental and children configurations, my goal here today is in no way to denigrate those types of non-traditional families, but rather to present the biblical ideal, to shoot for the ideal with the understanding that there are exceptions to the rule in which God is still glorified and children are still healthy and parents are still happy through the beautiful example of loving and godly parents. Some interesting information about two-parent versus one-parent households. Again, not to denigrate anyone's situation, but these are the findings in the family science world at this time. Professor Paul Amato of Pennsylvania State University recently published his findings of his investigation of numerous research studies in an article titled "The Impact of Family Formation Change on the Cognitive, Social, and Emotional Well-Being of the Next Generation." So Amato wanted to know the differences between children raised in two-parent households versus one-parent households, and he found that children who grow up in households with two continuously married parents are less likely to experience a wide range of problems. And so I'm going to enumerate on that for just a moment. Children from single-parent families have more behavioral problems, more emotional problems, lower levels of school engagement, that is caring about school and doing homework. And again, this is not everyone's experience, but this is just statistically, this is the way that it is. And two reasons are simple for that. Children who grow up in stable two-parent families have a higher standard of living. Hence, they're going to receive more effective parenting, experience more cooperative co-parenting, are emotionally closer to both parents, if both parents are there, and are subjected to fewer, though they're not immune, but fewer stressful events and circumstances. Studies also prove and have shown, and I'll get to risk behaviors in a moment, but studies also revealed similar findings of children of divorced parents and cohabiting parents, where the dissolution of marriage and the uncertainty of cohabitation, so living together unmarried, are reflected in the child's behavior and in the child's emotional state. So even though divorce is now pretty common, and approximately 42% of first marriages, 60% of second marriages, and about 72% of third marriages end up in divorce, averaging out roughly about 50% or so, children of divorced parents continue to exhibit lower average levels of cognitive, social, and emotional well-being. Again, I'm just reporting the facts, all right? Those are the facts. And so, when it comes to risk-taking behaviors, in 2009, a study published at Cornell University, researchers reported that children living with married biological parents have lower levels of risk-taking behaviors. So, when compared with single-parent and step-parent families, these children reported lower levels of substance abuse, such as smoking, drinking, and drugs. They were less likely to be sexually active when young, more likely to have long-lasting romantic relationships, and children in the study were also more likely to start their own family later on at an older age after they were married. So we see a decrease in risk behaviors where you've got a husband and wife, mother and father, living with their children in harmony. Physical health. Living with two parents, we have found, can lead to better health. So based on a national survey of children's health, children living with two biological parents or in a blended adoptive family were healthier, physically healthier, than children living with grandparents, single mothers, or step-parents. They had pretty good physical, dental health, fewer injuries as well, interestingly enough, that required medical attention. And in addition, these children were less affected, and this is fascinating to me, but they were less affected by asthma, less affected by frequent headaches, and less likely to miss more than 11 days of school due to illness. Economics. So while nearly half of all single mom families live in poverty, economic distress affects only 1 in 10 married families with children. Two-parent households tend to live in better neighborhoods, the children attend better schools, and that economic impact continues on into college. Well-being. Parental supervision and support directly will enhance children's well-being. So when compared with single-parent families, two-parent households more closely are able to, because they're less thinly spread, they're able to monitor their children's behavior, knowing where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. This type of monitoring is a powerful predictor of whether children will get into problematic behaviors or be sheltered or prevented in a way, or at least buffered from those sorts of behaviors. Two-parent households also tend toward more involvement in their children's schools, express higher educational goals, and when combined, monitoring and educational support account for the 20 plus to 40% increase in the well-being of a child raised in a two-parent home when compared to a child raised in a single-parent household. These are some very eye-opening statistics from the social sciences, from family studies, and they are definitely cause not to judge or to put down people that might be living in a single household or parents that are struggling to make ends meet, but simply to say, look, let's try to be more preventative. Let's try to encourage our young families to stay together, to have strong marriages where a mother and a father, godly husband and wife, can be in the home. Some blessings of godly parents, as I believe the Bible shows and as I see it. I think it's a tremendous, tremendous blessing for families to have a godly husband and wife, father and mother in the home. And so these blessings come in numerous forms, but some of the forms that I can think of immediately off the top of my head is just that mutual support, or the amount of support, physically, emotionally, spiritually, educationally, economically, all of that support that they can receive. It is multiplied by 2, right, if there are 2 there. The stability in the home, the stability of that family system is going to be greater, especially when it comes to boundaries, enforcement of discipline, rules in the family, expectations, as well as the economic and emotional stability. Safety, physically, emotionally, security, that is another blessing of a home. And then fourth, and most important, is having godly parents, a godly mother, a godly father will lead to an increase in spiritual guidance. Furthermore, the children will be beneficiaries of the blessings of seeing and understanding God-sanctioned heterosexual relationships between their father and their mother. They will have a better grip on gender identity and roles, again, vicariously by learning, by watching their parents, as these things are modeled in the home. And nothing is quite as powerful as a good Christian example. Years ago, I heard a story about a young woman from a congregation in Nashville who, in her reflection on her childhood, she had a sister. And she said that as she reflected on her family and her own faith development, she said the most powerful spiritual thing that she gained as a child and her sister gained is at nighttime, when the parents thought that they were sleeping, when they turned in for bed, they would crawl in and sneak into the parents' room to watch and hear the parents praying, kneeling beside the bed. And she listened to countless prayers that her father and her mother were leading. And she said that was probably one of the greatest spiritual encouragements that she ever and her sister ever were exposed to and ever experienced in the childhood. And guess what? The parents didn't even know. They did not even know the influence that their prayer life as a couple, their private prayer life as a couple, was having upon their two precious daughters. Faith is caught more often than it is taught. Faith is caught more often than it is taught through our example, where we're practicing what we preach and showing a consistency between our values, our biblical understanding, and our life, and our practice in our own spirituality. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." This is a general maxim. It's not always true, right? In Proverbs, we see some examples in Proverbs of things that are said. Generally, this is the case. And so, Proverbs 22, verse 6, to train up a child in the way that he should go is such an important part of our responsibility as parents. Colossians 3:21, "Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged." We want to discipline in a godly way. We want to lead in a helpful way, an affirming way to them. We don't want to provoke them. We don't want to anger them. We don't want to let our wrath and our attitude and our example turn them off of God, because as they're growing up, their God image, their primary concept of what God is like, who God is, God's nature, God's love, God's grace and mercy, and also God's discipline, is based on what they see in the collective image of their father and their mother. That's where children often develop their idea on what God is like. And so we must be very careful to represent the Holy One in the right way. In Ephesians 6:1-4, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." That's such a beautiful text. It ties so closely into Deuteronomy chapter 6 in the Shema, and that speaks also about the way that a father needs to lead the children from morning to night and speak about God and show God in their conversation and in their action, in their attitude and example. Well, parenting styles have changed over the past 50 years from more parent-dominated types of families to child-centered. And so priorities have evolved as well in approaches to discipline. And so we don't have time to go into a whole seminar on discipline. Maybe I could do that at some other point. But the TLC approach, we think about tender loving care, but in this case, TLC stands for time, limits, and care. Time. Parents spend more time with their children. We talk a lot about quality time. Quality time cannot exist without quantity of time. And guess what? Who decides what the quality time is? The kids do. We're not the ones that really determine what is quality in their eyes. And so it's often those moments that we don't think much was happening that they remember and that they hold near and dear to their heart. Limits is L, limits. Parents set firmer limits and expect more of the child in a variety of areas. There's a difference between an authoritarian parent, which is negative, to an authoritative parent. An authoritative parent sets fair limits, has very clear expectations, and very clear consequences. And so the child understands and knows what is to be expected and what will happen if they do and are positively reinforced, or don't and receive some form of punishment or discipline. Caring is the C, parents that take an interest in all aspects of their child's life. Not just educationally, not just sports or theater or music, all aspects, and that includes, first and foremost, the spiritual aspect, the spiritual formation, the spiritual development, the faith growth of that child. Positive discipline focuses on teaching a child how to behave responsibly in life, how to please the Lord, how to obey the rules. Emphasizes honoring and loving the child for the unique person that he or she already is. All right? So we're not trying to make them something that they're not. We're trying to show them, hey, these are good qualities that you've got. Let's build on those good qualities. Let's amplify those things, those gifts and those talents and those wonderful things that God has given you, so that you can be all that God wants you to be to His glory. And then catch them being good. Catch them being good and doing right. One of the most powerful things we can do discipline-wise, and by the way, the word disciple comes from the same Latin word as discipline, to be a disciple. If we can give that positive reinforcement, and we catch them doing something positive, maybe doing the dishes, cleaning up their room, helping somebody, being kind to an individual, or being respectful, being patient, we can pat them on the back and say, man, I'm so proud of what you did. I'm just beaming with pride because you're my kid, and look what a great kid you are. That goes a long way with a child, and they internalize that, and that impacts their sense of self-esteem as well. In Hebrews 12, 5 through 11, the Hebrews writer says, "And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by Him. For the Lord disciplines the one He loves, and He chastises every son whom He receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but He disciplines us for our own good, that we may share His holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Our loving Father in heaven disciplines us, and I'm thankful for it because He prevents us. He keeps us from, at times, going further into sin or going further down a road that might be very difficult to come back from. He does that because He loves us. In the same way, we discipline our children in a loving way, in a caring way, because we have their best interest at heart. The co-parenting model, mother and father, godly mother and father parenting their children. Mothers and fathers coordinate and they support one another's parenting efforts, and couples share the responsibilities. Now, again, fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, are wired differently. They bring different things to the table, different parts that I think a child needs. And so in co-parenting, we are going to provide that support. We're going to provide that accountability that the child needs as they grow in their faith and grow as an individual. What about the advantages for parents? For those that have a husband and wife, father, mother, living together in harmony in the Lord and serving and raising their children together. It provides greater satisfaction with marriage and family life. It improves their relationships with their children. It frees women to pursue outside interests, and some of those interests may be a career or maybe some other type of volunteer or church work that they want to be involved with. And it brings fathers into the family on an emotional level where we are more involved in the nurturing dimension of child rearing, and that's a beautiful and a good thing to see. So there are many advantages. As I conclude these thoughts, there's not such a thing as a perfect family. I don't have a perfect family. I'm not a perfect father by any stretch of the imagination. And there's not such a thing as perfect children, and to expect such is unfair on those kids. They're not perfect. They're going to mess up. They're going to make mistakes. They are going to fall on their face sometimes, and sometimes the best thing we can do is allow them to experience disappointment, allow them to experience failure, because didn't we learn through our failures? Didn't we learn through our disappointment to become more resilient and to pull ourselves up with God's help and maybe with our parents' help to get a firm footing underneath us again? But God's grace and mercy is present in our families. In fact, as Christians, we are spiritually adopted. We are spiritually adopted into God's magnificently diverse and beautiful household of faith. Romans 8:14 through 17, Ephesians 1, verse 3 through 10. And even more exciting than that, I'm so thankful that as Christians we have been chosen and redeemed by God's special plan and eternal purposes according to the mystery of His divine and perfect will, that we're heirs and we're joint heirs as brothers and sisters, as children of God, of His divine promises, and heirs of spiritual blessings that are all found in Jesus Christ, our elder brother. Especially the blessing and the hope of an heavenly inheritance to the praise of His glory. Ephesians 1, 11 through 14. It has been such a blessing, such an honor to be part of the series, and I hope that something that I myself and the other Ryan have brought have been helpful to you, practical, challenging, maybe in some ways inspiring to you to walk closer with the Lord, to study more deeply in His Word, to seek His face daily through your own life and through your example. What a blessing it is to have godly families, godly parents, and godly children. And I would like to close with one last verse from Psalm 127, 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. May God bless our homes, our families, parents, children, grandparents, uncles, aunts. Let us all live and walk in unity, solidarity with each other to the glory of God. God bless.
Last time, here we are, our last Q&A, which I kind of hate saying that because it's been really good and I've enjoyed my time. I hope you've enjoyed your time
I've loved it. This is, in fact, been my favorite part. I've got a feeling this will be the favorite part of you guys out there. At least you get to see David every time. But
they see that enough. I'm sure they've enjoyed seeing you here quite a bit. And it has been a blessing. So we're grateful that you've given us your time and
thank you.
Your expertise and certainly the effort you've put into the lessons. They've been a real help to our congregation. And we hope they cause a lot of conversation to help build our congregation up. So your final lesson, you talked about the impact of godly husbands and wives, a father and a mother, in the home. Mm-hmm. That's a big topic. And just given the title alone, one of the things that is going to come to mind in the conversation is that you recognize that not every Christian comes from what we would call a traditional home, having a father and mother in the home. In fact, many are raised by a single parent, either father or mother. Sometimes that's because they're widowed. Sometimes they're raised by grandparents. Right. Step-parents, there's all kinds of mixes in that. How do we keep those Christians who are not living or functioning in that set, how do we keep them from being marginalized in the church?
This is one of these interesting questions, and there are a couple of thoughts that come to mind. First of all, if you study through the Old Testament and even through the New Testament, our understanding of a traditional family is a very Western type of notion, because most households in Jesus' day, and even beyond and before, there were several generations living together in the one place. And so when Jesus promises his disciple, "In my Father's house are many rooms." Now the old version say, "My Father's house are many mansions," or something along those lines. But many rooms, that's a whole different concept of what a household looked like, even in Christ's day. And when the Apostle Paul is writing to these households, you've got some of them are woman-led households, like Lydia, for example. Other families have got servants that are part of that, included in that household.
And they would have lived in the structure.
They all lived in the structure, right? And so I think starting out with those, and in our congregations, we need to debunk some of the myth about the so-called traditional biblical family. There's a lot of interesting configurations of families in the Old and the New Testament. So that's one thing that looms large for me. But stepping beyond just the practical and the historicity of ancient families and their configurations and how they functioned, theologically, if we step back and ask ourselves, how does God view his household? And that's the term that's used, right? It's not family in Scripture. He speaks about his household, because a household encompasses actually more people. And in that household, there might be, if you think about humans, biological kin, adoptive kin, fictive kin, which are people that are like a son or daughter or like a parent, but aren't actually biologically related, right? Sure. So a text that I think is such a great encouragement, and it comes, of course, from the ministry of Jesus, and I just would be absolutely remiss not to look at this in Matthew 12, verse 46 through 50. This is very encouraging to individuals who are living in a quote-unquote non-traditional family type setup. Now, I'm not speaking about same-sex type of families, so let me clarify there, but I'm talking about single mothers, adoptive families, foster families, uncles and aunts raising nephews and nieces. You get it, right? Sure. So it says this, Matthew 12, 46 and following. While he was still speaking to the people, behold, his mother, Mary that is, and his brothers stood outside asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. I love the way that Jesus, man, in that moment, just in a few words, totally reframes for us our conceptualization of what a family is from the spiritual perspective.
It's expansive.
It's very expansive. It's very inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
It's very inclusive. And what it's not is, well, there is an exclusivity to it too, because he says, it's the ones who do the will of my Father.
Absolutely.
Who's in heaven, that are my family, my household.
Which is a choice. That's the interesting, you can choose to be a part of that.
And so we're going to go down this road, all right? So I'm going to say something that might blow some people's minds a little bit. I did a lot of research when I was doing my doctorate on the topic of adoption. Mm-hmm. And on adoptive families, and really my focus was on the spiritual narratives of adoptive parents. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed a lot of adoptive couples and did this research. In the midst of all that, I went back to ancient texts like Hammurabi's Code, the Old Testament, just these ancient concepts, and even in biblical times, what was adoption? We often think of adoption as being adopting, a grown-up adopting a baby or an infant or a small child. But in Jesus' day, adoption typically was not that way. Typically it was an adult, the pater familias, or the head of the household, adopting an adult to come into that family because, for whatever reason, maybe infertility or elsewhere, there was no one to take over that role as the head of that household. And so they would adopt somebody that they thought might be even a servant or a slave that they thought this person might really be able to step up into the role. In fact, in Roman history, there were emperors who adopted individuals because there wasn't a good heir, adopted adults to take over the heirship. So you got this adoption. So going back into like Romans 8 and early on in Ephesians, it talks about this concept of being adopted as children. In those cases, adoption was not only a choice for the father, the parents, but it was a choice for the adoptee. Totally reframes our concept of being baptized, being adopted into God's family. We have a choice in that.
Absolutely.
And so it's not, we don't practice infant baptism because they don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't fit. So think about the biblical understanding of that and just that cultural world, sociocultural world, and the history around that. It just gives us an insight on what it means for us to be adopted into the household of God with all the blessings, all the rights, all the privileges that go with that. God's chosen us. We got to decide, are we going to choose Him back?
Right.
And that's just awesome to think
It is
about.
awesome. And in that context, when we ask the question of, how do we keep from marginalizing people, and we see this, and you realize, oh, well, if I'm marginalizing people, I have taken the complete wrong approach to what God's doing.
That's right.
Which is bringing in people, lifting up people, which is a very compassionate and loving and well beyond the norm.
We inherit His name, our Lord's name, when we come into the family of God, but we also find kinship in the church. We find brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and grandparents and children. Think about Paul's admonition both to Timothy and Titus just on how they were to view the people in the church through pure eyes and see, especially the opposite sex, right? See them as sisters and mothers. And it totally reframes our understanding of family that is connected not just by blood, but by spirit.
It's a very strong connection.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it is. I've always appreciated that in the church, to have the older person and sharing their wisdom. They're willing to share that, and I'm just going to eat that up as much as possible. But then even on the flip side, to be around younger people, and you just get a kind of energy and vitality and just enthusiasm for what's going on. And when you put all that together, you're like, wow, this is something very special.
I'm so blessed at the congregation I preach at in Bethel Springs. We have a large group of college students that come there, and these college students they're the age of my kids, and so I look at them and I just see them. These are like my kids.
You're naturally prone to.
I serve as an elder in the congregation as well as a preacher there, and part of the shepherding is also, I've got this responsibility to them beyond just this, the spiritual aspect, just to care and reach out and love on them and make them feel included, that they're an important part of our congregation during this time in their life. So that's just a great thing. And I know here in this congregation, you've got incredible people, hospitable people that reach out, that love on the little ones, that love on the widow ladies, and couples with young children that need the support. We're in this family, in this household together, and one of the places we see the grace of God shown, I think, the most is through those relationships that are so precious and powerful, and really transformative to us in our walk with God.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want it any other way. It's amazing. Well, let's talk about something, just kind of building off that. Obviously, there are roles for fathers and mothers to perform, and obviously they do that as husband and wife for one another, and they do that for the children, and there's a sense of community that comes out of that. But what I would like to hear from you, some insights on how do they fulfill those roles to the glory of God? Mm-hmm. How do they do that for the purpose of God?
Yeah. I think about Paul in Colossians 3 saying, just whatever we do it, in the name of Jesus. And
mm-hmm.
we're serving to His, in His authority and to His glory. And so even if it's things that are, we might think of mundane tasks that fathers have to do, or earning income that mother and father might be doing, or cleaning up the house, or mowing the grass, raising our kids, spending time with them. All of that, even the most mundane things, can bring glory to God, because we're doing it to the Lord and not to man.
I love that you talk about
That's
the mundane.
Actually Ephesians. I think it was Colossians 4 that was talking about.
Okay. I love that you're talking about the mundane, because so many times we're tempted to think that those moments are happening at these big, exciting, spectacular events in life. And to be sure, there are big, spectacular events where you really get to see things done for God's glory. But truly, in the everyday, in the mundane, in the little things, it builds up for a total picture of something very special in those acts, those considerations for God's glory.
That old saying, the devil's in the details.
Mm-hmm.
But the solutions and God is in the details
mm-hmm.
of life. And whether it's a parent dropping the kid off at school, using that time with the kid to share God with them, to talk about God, to say a little prayer on the way. Those can be such special moments. Or those that have got grown children
mm-hmm.
and are now grandparents. What a great opportunity to invest your life and your wisdom and your time, into the life of those grandkids. I don't have grandkids yet, but I'm encouraging my daughter as quickly as possible. She's married a couple of years, but I just, I think those opportunities to bring the love of God, bring this ministry of presence, even within our own families. So many families these days are so hung up on their phones and so distracted. Mm-hmm. They're everywhere except for in the room with those kids, with each other. And we complain sometimes about our kids being addicted to their technology and to their phones. A lot of parents and grandparents are becoming that way, and so we need to maybe lay that aside and really have eye contact and be there present. I think just that gift of time, that gift of our attention speaks volumes.
It really does. It carries a lot of weight, and we need to see more of it. Another aspect, one of the last things we'll talk about here is finding ways for husbands and wives to work together instead of in opposition.
Well, I've never heard of that.
It's a novel thought, but sometimes they may find themselves going in two different directions, not on the same page. What are some things that we can do in the church to help encourage families to come together in that way?
Okay. I can't speak for every family. I can say just in my own family, my wife works outside the home. She's a school counselor at an economically deprived school system in our area. But something that we know, even though our children are all but grown, and virtually grown, we know that it starts with us. It starts with she and with me. And so we've set up this weekly appointment. We're both, of course, like everyone else, is very busy in our lives. Me and my work as a professor and counselor, her and her education work and such like. But we set up this appointment every week at 11:15. So I go to chapel at Freed, got my truck parked outside, hop in the truck, I go through Wendy's or somewhere where we can get a good salad or something like that, drive to her school, and we have we connect over a little food. We just have about 30 to 45 minutes just during a break she has.
Well, hold on, just to make sure I follow you here. You have a specific day you're doing this on?
Every Thursday.
Every Thursday at a specific time.
Every Thursday.
So you have a very deliberate choice made here, scheduled.
It's in my daytime. Every Thursday at 11:15. So I go to the school, go in, we eat together in her room. Then we've got a prayer journal. And in the prayer journal, we've broken it up into two columns. So the one column is things we're thankful for, praises, and the other column is petitions, things we're asking for.
Praise and petitions.
Okay, so our unwritten policy is that we'll never ask God for more things that we're going to thank God for. So we sit there, we actually literally write down in the columns or the pages, right? We're doing different pages now on it, but maybe 10, 12 things we're thankful for, 10, 12 things we're praying for. Then we go through, I'll take half the list, she'll take half the list. We pray together.
Okay.
It's incredible to hear a woman, hear your wife pray outside of church, right? It's not a church service. But we pray together. We keep this book, and we go back to it periodically to see the petition list that's moved now to the Thanksgiving column. And just the energy, the spiritual energy, the connection that gives us in that little time every week, it imbues every other part of our lives. And so, for example, this couple of days ago, when we were praying, one of the things on the list we were praying about my coming up here, and Missy prayed over that. Yeah. And I think it's such a simple thing, but it's got to be intentional, and it has far-reaching effects in our immediate family, in our congregational life, in our professional life, and of course in her relationship with me. We talk about being one flesh. One fleshness involves more than just the physical. It involves the spiritual, the emotional,
critical element of that
aspect. And so that's just a really, really simple thing that just husbands and wives can do.
Yeah.
But it starts there. If we as a couple are really going to be on the same page. If you cannot get on the same page spiritually with your spouse, and you cannot make that or refuse to make that a focus in your relationship outside of attending church, that's great. But if that's not a focus, you're headed for trouble. You're headed for trouble as a couple. Mm-hmm. And so inviting God into the fabric of our week and making it again intentional is such a blessing to me as a husband, and it's such a blessing to our grown children, because they know that they understand what we're doing with this. And I think just that example, I hope, will stick with them for years and years to come.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's very personal, but it's also something that's so spot on and just seeing that you have to view that as having incredible value to put that kind of effort into it. And then I'm sure at some point it doesn't take quite the same effort as you're seeing the blessings flow out of that.
It becomes a habit.
Yeah, but a joyous habit.
A good habit.
Yeah.
A good habit.
Instead of a burden. That's pretty critical. Well, Ryan, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I appreciate you coming to be here with us. Any closing thoughts? Because this is it. This is going to end our Q&A. Until next time.
Yeah, I just, again, I just hope that those that are part of this congregation and those that are maybe from other congregations, or if you don't have a congregation, find a good church home. So let me say that. But those that are particularly here at Washington Avenue, I hope that you will take every opportunity to plug into the family here, the family of God here. 1 Corinthians 12 tells us every part of the body, every member has an important, a critical role to play. Some of them are seen roles and out there, others are more hidden. But plug in and be somebody that you might not have the greatest ability, but have availability to God, and serve in a way that is not to pat yourself on the back, but to bring glory to the Lord and to grow the boundaries of the kingdom of God, the household of God. But again, I thank the leaders and of this congregation. David, thank you for being such a gracious host in this time, and I hope to maybe get to come back at some point and share some more, maybe in a setting where the auditorium is filled and we're out there and we can really meet and fellowship in a great way. But what a blessing. God bless to you.
We hope that too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.